I don't care what it cost. Burn it down. With him inside if possible. You fell? Oh my god, Rose! I love you, Kang Taemin.
Get down now!
Kang Taemin settling down? Never thought I'd see the day.
Taemin's lips found the curve of Rose's shoulder where her nightgown strap had slipped during the night, planting slow, deliberate kisses that made her stir from sleep. His mouth was warm against her skin, worshipping every inch he could reach. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured against her collarbone. Rose's eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep, but the smile on Taemin's face made her instantly alert. It was too bright, too pleased with itself. In the months she'd been with him, she'd learned to read his expressions like a language only she understood. "You're smiling a little too brightly for me," she said, her voice still rough from sleep. "What did you do?" Instead of answering, he kissed her neck, his lips trailing from her shoulder to the sensitive spot just below her ear. Then down to her throat, back up to her jaw. Each kiss sent heat spiraling through her body, making coherent thought impossible. Rose's breath hitched as his mouth explored her skin with single-minded focus, his hands gentle but possessive on her waist. God, she wanted him to touch her again like the first time he'd taken her. Wanted his hands everywhere, wanted to feel that all-consuming passion that made the world disappear. But how could she ask? Pride and shyness warred inside her, keeping the words trapped in her throat. So she sat there drowning in his kisses, her body responding even as her voice remained silent. "I have a surprise for you," he said between kisses, his breath hot against her neck. "A surprise?" Rose managed to ask, her hands gripping his shoulders for support. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, and she saw something soft there. Something that looked almost like excitement. "You heard me. Wear something comfortable and meet me downstairs in 20 minutes. His tone had shifted. The commanding aura she'd come to recognize was back, wrapping around each word with absolute authority. He stood, then, and Rose couldn't help but stare. All 6 feet 3 inches of him walked toward the bathroom, shirtless, every muscle defined and moving with predatory grace. He was temptation incarnate, and he was hers. She still couldn't quite believe it. 20 minutes later, Rose descended the stairs wearing comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She'd spent half that time trying to calm her racing heart, wondering what surprise could make Taemin smile like that. Taemin wasn't in the living room when she arrived, but someone else was. Her father sat carefully on the sofa, looking almost out of place among the expensive furniture and cold minimalist design. But it was him. Really him. "Daddy." The word tore from Rose's throat. His head snapped toward her voice instantly, and the smile that broke across his face was the most beautiful thing she'd seen in months. He stood, arms opening, and Rose was already running. She crashed into him at what felt like a ridiculous speed, but she didn't care. She was in her father's arms. "My beautiful girl," he said, his voice cracking on the words as he held her tight. Rose buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee and the cologne he'd worn for years. Tears streamed down her face, but they were good tears, happy tears. How are you here?" "Mr. Kang brought me." Her father's hand stroked her hair the way he had when she was a child. "He sent a car this morning. Said you needed to see me." Rose pulled back to look at him. Really look at him. He looked well. Better than she'd ever seen him, actually. The lines of stress that had been etched around his eyes were gone. He'd gained some weight. Healthy weight. And he was smiling. Genuinely smiling in a way she hadn't seen since before her mother died. "The cafe?" she asked. "Thriving. Better than it's been in years." He cupped her face in his hands. "Rose, he took care of everything. The debt? Everything. I can actually breathe for the first time in years." They sat on the sofa together, and Rose couldn't stop touching him, holding his hand, squeezing his arm as if to confirm he was really there. They talked for hours. He told her about how the cafe had new equipment, how customers were flooding in, how he'd hired 2 new employees. She told him about her life here, carefully editing out the darker parts, focusing on the moments of happiness she'd found. "Does he make you happy?" her father asked suddenly, his eyes searching her face with the intensity only a parent could manage. The question hit Rose like a physical thing. Did Taemin make her happy? "Yes," she heard herself say. "In his own twisted way, he does. He makes me feel seen, protected, wanted. I know it's not conventional, Dad. I know it's not what you dreamed for me. But yes, he makes me happy." Her father was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he nodded slowly. "I see it. In your eyes. The way you talk about him. You love him." Rose felt tears prick her eyes again. "I do. God help me. I do." "Then that's all that matters." He squeezed her hand. "Your mother would want you to be happy, Rose, even if happy looks different than we imagined." When her father finally left, escorted by the same driver who'd brought him, Rose stood at the window watching the car disappear. Her father's question kept ringing in her ears. "Does he make you happy?" And the answer that had come so quickly, so certainly. Yes. She loved Kang Taemin. The realization settled over her like a warm blanket, undeniable and absolute. She loved this dangerous, complicated, possessive man who'd bought her but given her more than he'd taken. Rose basically ran to his study, desperate to thank him, to show him what his gift had meant. She pushed open the double doors, without knocking, too overwhelmed to care about propriety. Taemin stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the Seoul skyline. He turned when she entered, one eyebrow raising in question. She didn't give him time to speak. Rose ran toward him, and when she reached him, she pulled him down by his collar and crashed her lips against his. For a heartbeat, he was stunned. She felt it in the way his body went rigid with surprise. But even that didn't last. His hands found her waist, drawing her deeper into him, and he kissed her back like a man who'd been starving. Like she was air and he'd been drowning. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rose pressed her forehead against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." She felt his lips press against the top of her head, felt his arms come around her in an embrace that was tender despite his usual intensity. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, and Rose had never felt more safe. Before she could think better of it, before fear or hesitation could stop her, Rose pulled back and looked up at him. "Take me again, Kang Taemin." He went completely still. Slowly, so slowly it felt like time had stopped, he drew back to look at her eyes. "What did you say?" Rose's heart hammered against her ribs, but she held his gaze. "I said take me. Make me yours in every possible way." His eyes darkened with something fierce and hungry and almost reverent. He kissed her then, slower this time, filled with meaning. Filled with so much emotion, Rose felt her heart would burst open with the weight of it. When he pulled back just slightly, his forehead resting against hers, his voice came out rough. "Are you sure?" Rose looked at him, really looked at him, at the intensity and restraint battling in his eyes, at the way his jaw was clenched with the effort of holding himself back, at how this powerful, dangerous man was waiting for her permission, her choice. "Yes," she breathed. "I am." And immediately his lips were on hers again, but different this time, desperate, hungry, like months of carefully maintained control had finally snapped. He backed her against his desk, and there was nothing soft about his touch. It was raw and demanding, and exactly what Rose wanted. She wanted to feel his hunger, wanted to know she could undo him this completely. When he finally eased her of her clothes, she expected to feel exposed, vulnerable. Instead, she felt powerful, because the way he looked at her, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, like he couldn't believe she was his. Made her feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. Yepeuda, he murmured in Korean, his voice reverent. Then in English, "You're so beautiful." Rose felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Here?" she asked shyly, glancing at the desk. His smile was slow and devastating. "I'll have you in the living room if you'd let me. I'm not a gentleman, little Rose." Then he pulled her close, his touch reverent, as if she were something precious. His lips followed softly along her skin, lingering just long enough to make her breath hitch. Rose tried to stay quiet, but the closeness, the intensity of the moment, drew quiet sighs from her before she could stop them. Sounds she barely noticed as everything else faded away. When they finally came together, it was fire and love and hunger and promise, all wrapped into one overwhelming sensation. Rose clung to him, her nails digging into his shoulders, losing herself completely in the feeling of him. After, when they were both breathing hard and trembling, Taemin buried his head in her neck. "I will never have enough of this," he whispered against her skin. "You are going to be the death of me, little Rose." Rose had never felt happier than she did in this moment, with this man who had bought her, owned her. The twisted truth was, she wanted to be owned by him, completely. Utterly owned by this man who looked like sin and temptation wrapped in one devastatingly beautiful package. Taemin scooped her up suddenly, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. He carried her through the penthouse to their bedroom, then into the bathroom. Once inside, he set her down gently in the large tub before turning to fill it with warm water. Rose watched him, feeling the domesticity of the moment settle over her like a new kind of intimacy. This wasn't just about passion anymore. This was about being cared for, about being seen not just as an object of desire, but as someone precious. When the tub filled with warm steam, Taemin stepped in behind her, settling close and drawing her back against him. Rose felt her cheeks warm at the unfamiliar closeness. Sharing the quiet space like this was new, his presence calm and reassuring as his hands moved carefully over her shoulders, slow and soothing. "Turn around, Rose." She felt warmth pool in her belly at his tone, commanding but tender. She looked at him over her shoulder. "I can bathe myself," she protested softly, suddenly feeling shy. His eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "That wasn't a request, little Rose." Rose turned to face him in the warm water, suddenly very aware of every place their skin touched. The steam rose around them, creating an intimate cocoon that felt removed from the rest of the world. Taemin's hands were gentle as they traced her shoulders, down her arms, washing her with a care that made her chest ache. But Rose couldn't resist. She leaned forward slightly, letting her fingers trail down his chest, tracing the lines of his muscles beneath the water. She felt him tense under her touch, saw his jaw clench. "Careful," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. Rose looked up at him through her lashes, a small smile playing on her lips. She didn't stop. Her hands continued their exploration, moving lower, teasing. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Rose," I said, careful. "I heard you," she whispered, emboldened by the hunger she saw darkening his eyes. "But I don't think I want to be careful." Something snapped in him. In one fluid movement, he pulled her onto his lap, water sloshing over the sides of the tub. His mouth found hers in a kiss that was all-consuming, desperate, claiming. Rose gasped against his lips, her arms wrapping around his neck as he pressed her closer. "You play dangerous games, little Rose," he growled against her mouth. "Maybe I like danger," she breathed back. This time felt different from the office. In the small, steam-filled space, everything seemed heightened, quieter, closer, more personal. The warmth of the water and his steady presence grounded her as she leaned into him, their closeness unbroken. Rose let go of everything else, lost in the moment. The soft sounds of water and breath filling the room as time seemed to slow. When it was over, they stayed tangled together in the cooling water, both breathing hard. Taemin's hand stroked her wet hair back from her face, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "You're going to ruin me," he murmured. Rose smiled against his chest. "Good." Later, dried and exhausted in the best way, they collapsed into bed together. Taemin pulled her back against his chest, his arm heavy and possessive around her waist. Rose felt sleep pulling at her almost immediately, satisfied and safe in a way she'd never been before. "I love you," she heard him whisper just as she was drifting off, so quiet she almost missed it. Rose smiled into the darkness, too tired to respond, but feeling the words settle warm in her chest. The next morning, Rose woke to an empty bed and sunlight streaming through the windows. Taemin had already left for the day to handle whatever businessmen, like him, handled. She stretched, feeling pleasantly sore, and was just considering getting up when she heard a knock on the bedroom door. "Come in," Rose called, pulling the sheets up to her chin. The door opened and Haesoo peeked in, her face breaking into the most knowing smirk Rose had ever seen. "So? Oh my God!" Rose buried her face in the pillow, feeling her cheeks burn. "I feel embarrassed." "You guys did it." Haesoo bounced into the room, closing the door behind her. She looked even more excited than Rose felt, which was saying something. "We did," Rose admitted, her voice muffled by the pillow. Then she lifted her head. "Not after I embarrassed myself anyway." "What do you mean?" Haesoo sat on the edge of the bed, practically vibrating with curiosity. Rose groaned, covering her face with her hands. "I tried to seduce him last night. You know, with the robe and everything like you suggested. And I was trying to walk toward him and what? I fell," Rose said, peeking through her fingers. "I literally tripped on the rug and fell flat on my face. Well, I would have if he hadn't caught me." There was a moment of silence, and then Haesoo burst out laughing. The sound was so genuine and joyful that Rose found herself laughing too, the embarrassment fading in the face of her friend's infectious humor. "You fell?" Haesoo managed between giggles. It was mortifying. But then he laughed. Actually laughed. And it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Rose sat up, hugging her knees to her chest, a smile playing on her lips. Haesoo wiped tears from her eyes, her laughter finally subsiding. "That's actually really sweet. I'm happy for you, Rose. You deserve this." "Thank you, Haesoo." Haesoo reached over and squeezed her hand. "Always. Now get up and get dressed. I'll make us breakfast, and you can tell me all the non-embarrassing details." Rose threw a pillow at her, but she was smiling. For the first time in months, she felt like she had someone who understood. That evening, in a private room of one of Seoul's most exclusive clubs, 4 men sat around a poker table. Smoke from expensive cigars curled toward the ceiling, mixing with the scent of aged whiskey. The stakes on the table were ridiculous. More money than most people saw in a lifetime. "It's all in the poker face, brothers," Ji-ho grinned, raking in his chips after winning for the 4th time that evening. Song Yubin shook his head, his massive frame relaxed in his chair despite losing. "You're either cheating or the luckiest bastard in Seoul." "I prefer to think of it as a skill," Ji-ho replied with that boyish grin that made him look younger than his 29 years. Ho Jun-jae, Taemin's second-in-command, studied his cards with the same calculating intensity he brought to everything. He was handsome in a sharp, dangerous way, similar to Taemin but less intense, softer around the edges. Where Taemin was ice, Jun-jae was controlled fire. They'd just finished discussing the strategy for their next arms deal, a shipment coming in from Russia that needed to be moved through 3 countries before landing in Seoul. The details had been worked out with military precision, as they always were. Now they were supposedly relaxing, though men like them never truly relaxed. Taemin sat with his usual controlled posture, whiskey glass in hand, watching the game more than playing it. He'd been quieter than usual tonight, his mind clearly elsewhere. His friends had noticed. Of course they had. But no one had commented. Until now. I'm going to marry her, Taemin said suddenly, his voice cutting through the casual banter like a blade. 3 pairs of eyes snapped to him. The cards in Junjae's hand lowered slowly. Jiho's perpetual grin faded into something more serious. Yubin straightened, in his chair, his massive frame suddenly alert. You? Junjae said after a beat, a smirk playing on his lips. Kang Taemin wants to settle down? Never thought I'd see the day, Jiho added, though there was genuine warmth in his voice beneath the teasing. Taemin's expression didn't change. He took a measured sip of his whiskey, his dark eyes meeting each of theirs in turn, with that unwavering intensity that made most men look away. These 3 didn't. I'm serious. We can see that, Yubin said, his deep voice thoughtful. He'd known Taemin the longest, had seen him build this empire from nothing, had watched him become the man he was now. When? Soon. Taemin set down his glass with careful precision. I haven't asked her yet. She'll say yes, Junjae said with absolute certainty. You seem crazy enough about her in your own twisted way. And how you are with her, Jiho added. It's actually disgusting how soft you've gotten. Taemin's gaze shifted to Jiho, cold and sharp. Careful. But Jiho just grinned, unrepentant. See? Prove my point and you threaten me. The old Taemin would have just shot me. I still might, Taemin replied, but there was no real heat in his words. Yubin raised his glass. To your future marriage, then, may she continue making you slightly less terrifying to work for. Barely less terrifying, Junjae corrected with a slight smile. Infinitesimally less terrifying, Jiho agreed. Despite himself, something that might have been amusement flickered across Taemin's features. These 3 men were more than his inner circle, more than his most trusted allies. They were the closest thing to family he had, forged in blood and fire, and years of surviving a world that showed no mercy. She's good for you, boss, Yubin said more seriously. Taemin was quiet for a moment, rolling the whiskey glass between his hands. Couldn't agree more. The admission hung in the air. For a man like Taemin to say such a thing was significant, profound even. It spoke to a vulnerability none of them had ever seen from him before. Then marry her, Junjae said simply, and we'll make sure nothing and no one ever threatens what you've built together. Agreed, Jiho and Yubin said simultaneously. Taemin looked at each of them, his second in command, his enforcer, his strategist. His brothers in everything but blood. Thank you. They returned to the game, but something had shifted. An understanding passed between them. Rose wasn't just Taemin's woman now. She was under their protection, part of their circle, and anyone who threatened her would answer to all 4 of them. Jiho won the next 3 hands in a row, his grin growing more insufferable with each victory. You're definitely cheating, Junjae finally said, throwing down his cards. I would never, Jiho replied, his expression the picture of innocence. You absolutely are, Yubin agreed. The question is how. As they argued and laughed and drank, anyone watching would have seen it. The genuine bond between these 4 dangerous men. The kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought or forced. The kind forged in darkness and blood, stronger than any contract or oath. They were predators, all of them. But they were predators who'd chosen each other, who'd survived and thrived together in a world designed to destroy them. Rose's hand was tucked into the crook of Taemin's arm as they walked from the restaurant toward where his car waited. The Seoul night air was cool against her skin, a welcome contrast to the warmth of the intimate dinner they'd just finished. She wore an elegant, deep green dress that hugged her curves, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She felt beautiful, happy, content in a way she hadn't thought possible months ago. Taemin's hand rested possessively on the small of her back, his touch familiar and grounding. He looked devastating in his black suit, and Rose caught herself stealing glances at his profile as they walked. His bodyguards flanked them at a respectful distance, close enough to protect, far enough to give them the illusion of privacy. "That was wonderful," Rose said, squeezing his arm. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me for taking you to dinner, little Rose." His voice held that slight amusement she'd come to recognize. "I know, but I want to." She smiled up at him. "I want to thank you for everything. For my father. For making me feel." The first gunshot shattered the night. Everything happened at once. Taman moved with a speed that stole Rose's breath, his body slamming into hers, taking her to the ground behind a parked car. The impact knocked the air from her lungs, but his hand cradled her head, protecting her even as they fell. More gunshots. The sound was deafening, echoing off the buildings. Rose heard shouting. His bodyguards returning fire, voices yelling in Korean. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Stay down," Taman ordered, his voice Arctic cold. Gone was the man who'd smiled at her over dinner. In his place was someone else entirely. Someone terrifying. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket. Where had that been? And Rose watched in frozen horror as he rose slightly, aimed, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. Each shot was precise, controlled, lethal. She heard bodies hitting the pavement. A man appeared around the car, gun raised toward them. Rose didn't even have time to scream. Taman moved, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it with a sickening crack, and put a bullet through his skull at point-blank range. Blood sprayed. The body crumpled. Rose couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was seeing. Taman was efficient. Cold. Every movement calculated for maximum lethality. He wasn't defending them. He was hunting. Moving forward with his bodyguards in perfect synchronization, clearing the area with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Another attacker emerged from the shadows. Taman shot him twice in the chest before the man could even raise his weapon. The body fell backward, lifeless. Rose pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. This was him. This was who Kang Taman really was. Not the man who whispered, "I love you" in the darkness. Not the man who'd brought her father to see her. This was the monster everyone feared. The killer. The Don. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. The silence that followed was somehow worse, broken only by her ragged breathing and the ringing in her ears. Taman turned back to her, gun still in his hand, and Rose flinched. She couldn't help it. His eyes, God, his eyes, were completely empty, black and cold and utterly devoid of humanity. Then something shifted. He blinked, and Rose watched the monster recede as the man she knew fought his way back to the surface. He holstered his gun and was beside her in 2 strides, his hands on her face, checking her frantically for injuries. "Are you hurt? Rose, look at me. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to form words. Her whole body was trembling, shock settling into her bones like ice. "Yubin, sweep the perimeter. Ji-ho, check the bodies. Junjae, get the car now." Taemin barked orders without looking away from Rose. His hands were gentle on her face, such a stark contrast to the violence she'd just witnessed. "Baby, I need you to talk to me. Tell me you're okay." Rose's voice cracked. "I'm okay, I'm not hurt." A black SUV screeched to a stop beside them. Taemin lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the vehicle. She caught a glimpse of the carnage, bodies on the pavement, blood pooling dark under the streetlights, bullet casings glinting like scattered coins. 5 men. He'd killed 5 men in less than 2 minutes. But to her, he wasn't a monster. Even now, even after what she'd seen, all she felt was relief that he was alive. That they were both alive. The drive back to the penthouse was silent except for Taemin's clipped voice as he spoke rapid Korean into his phone. His arms stayed locked around Rose, holding her against his chest as if he was afraid she might disappear. She could feel his heart pounding, could feel the tension radiating from every muscle in his body. When they finally reached the penthouse, Taemin carried her inside. The lights were already on, more of his men stationed throughout the space. She recognized Song Yubin's massive frame by the windows, Ji-ho at the door, Ho Jun-jae coordinating with others via phone. Taemin set Rose down on the sofa carefully, as if she were made of glass. Stay here. I need to— Don't leave, Rose heard herself say, her hand grabbing his jacket. Please don't leave me. His jaw clenched. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, duty warring with the need to stay with her. Finally, he turned to Yubin. Lock down the building. No one in or out without my authorization. Start pulling surveillance footage from every camera within a 5-block radius of the restaurant. I want to know who sent them, and I want to know within the hour. On it, boss. Yubin was already moving. Taemin sat beside Rose, pulling her onto his lap. She went willingly, burying her face in his neck, breathing in his familiar scent mixed with gunpowder and something metallic that might have been blood. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his lips against her hair. I'm so sorry you had to see that. You saved my life. I put your life in danger by being with you. His arms tightened around her. Rose pulled back to look at him. Really look at him. At the man who'd just killed 5 people without hesitation. At the man who was now holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. And I told you I'm not leaving. You saw what I am. I saw you protecting me. I saw you doing what needed to be done to keep us alive. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Yes, you're dangerous. Yes, you're violent. Yes, you're everything the world says you are. But you're also mine. And I'm not afraid of you, Taemin. Something cracked in his expression. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I need to handle this. Find out who ordered the hit. Make sure it never happens again. I know. Rose traced her fingers along his jaw. Just come back to me. Promise me you'll come back. Always. He kissed her once, more, softer this time, then gently moved her off his lap. Yubin will stay with you. Don't leave this penthouse, not for any reason. Rose nodded, watching as he stood and became someone else again. The softness disappeared, replaced by cold authority. He was the Don now, and someone was about to learn what happened when you touched what belonged to Kang Tae-min. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Rose sat curled on the sofa, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite not feeling cold. Yubin stood like a silent sentinel by the windows, his presence somehow comforting despite his intimidating size. She could hear voices from Taemin's study, his, Jun-jae's, others she didn't recognize. Then the door opened and Taemin emerged, followed by his inner circle. His expression was carved from ice, dark and merciless. We found them. Who? Rose asked, though part of her already knew. Park and his daughter. Taemin's voice was devoid of emotion. They hired the hit team. Rose felt cold settle in her stomach. What are you going to do? What needs to be done to people who test my patients more than once? He crossed to her, crouching down so they were eye level. Taemin, I love you, he said, cutting her off. Remember that. That's the only thing that's real. All of this is just noise. Then he was gone, and Rose was left alone with Yubin and the terrible knowledge of what the man she loved was about to do. 3 hours later, in the lavish study of Assemblyman Park's private estate, Taemin sat casually in a leather chair, his legs crossed, a gun resting loosely in his hand. The room was a disaster. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, clear evidence of the violence that had preceded this moment. Park knelt on the floor in front of him, hands bound, face bloodied, expensive suit torn and stained. His guards were dead. His staff had fled. There was no one coming to save him. We've been allies for a very long time, Mr. Park, haven't we? Taemin's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Park nodded frantically, blood dripping from his split lip. That means you know me better than most. You know what I'm capable of. You know better than to cross me, or to be in my bad graces. Taemin leaned forward slightly, his eyes absolutely devoid of warmth. Yet here we are. Because you touched what was mine. You son of a... Park gasped out. How dare you do this? How dare you accuse me of... You funded the hit team, your accounts, your contacts. Taemin's voice remained calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. Don't insult my intelligence by lying. Please. Taemin, please. We can work this out. I'll give you anything. You have nothing I want, except your suffering. Taemin raised the gun, and Park's eyes went wide with terror. But killing you is of no interest to me, and I have more important things to protect now than my pride. He fired. The bullet grazed Park's left ear so close the heat of it scorched skin. Park screamed, clutching the side of his head as blood poured between his fingers. The ringing in his ear would be permanent. The deafness, irreversible. Next time I won't miss, Taemin said, standing. Next time I'll put a bullet in your head and deal with whatever consequences come. Do you understand me? Park nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood. Your daughter ran. Smart girl. If she's even smarter, she'll stay gone. Taemin holstered his gun, straightening his jacket. But if I see her face again, if I hear she's even breathed Rose's name, I won't just kill her, Park. I'll make her death last days, and you'll watch every second of it before I end you too. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. I don't make empty threats. Remember that. Taemin left Park sobbing on the floor of his ruined study, deaf in one ear, broken but alive. It was a worse punishment than death, living with the knowledge that Kang Taemin had shown mercy once, and only once. Minji would hear about this. She'd know what happened to her father. And if she had any survival instinct at all, she'd disappear and never surface again. But Taemin knew something about desperate, humiliated people. They rarely made smart choices. They made emotional ones. Back at the penthouse, Rose paced in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dawn was breaking over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, but she barely noticed. Her mind was trapped in an endless loop. The gunshots, the bodies, the blood, the cold emptiness in Taemin's eyes as he'd killed without hesitation. But worse than that was the waiting. Not knowing if he was safe. Not knowing if he was coming back. The house was heavily guarded. Yubin had made sure of that before. He'd left with the others. She'd counted at least 8 men stationed throughout the penthouse, all armed, all watching. She was safe. Protected. But none of that mattered if Taemin didn't come home. The front door opened. Rose spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Taemin walked in, and relief hit her so hard her knees nearly buckled. He looked exhausted, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with what might have been blood, his hair disheveled. But he was alive. He was here. Without thinking, Rose launched herself at him. He caught her by the waist, his arms coming around her immediately, pulling her close. She wrapped herself around him, her face buried in his neck, breathing him in. Hey, baby, he whispered against her hair, his voice rough with exhaustion. Rose pulled back just enough to look at his face, her hands cupping his jaw, checking him for injuries. Are you hurt? Are you okay? I'm fine. It's not my blood. She should have been disturbed by that, should have recoiled. Instead, she just held him tighter. What happened? Taemin guided her to the sofa, pulling her onto his lap, positioning her so she was straddling him, their faces level. His hands settled on her waist, thumbs stroking gentle circles through the fabric of her dress. It's handled, he said simply. You killed them? Rose asked, her voice barely a whisper. I wish I did. But killing Park would start a war. I can't have that. He leaned back slightly, studying her face. I made sure he understood what happens if he comes near you again. He won't be a problem. And Minji? She ran. Smart move. His jaw tightened. If she shows her face again, I won't hesitate to teach her a lesson she'll never forget. Rose was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she met his eyes. I'm sorry you had to see that tonight, little Rose, but this is who I am. It's never going to change. There will be more danger, more violence, more darkness. A life you shouldn't have to witness. Rose felt her chest tighten. She knew where this was going, could hear it in his voice, see it in his eyes. What are you saying, Taemin? Her hands gripped his shoulders, worry crystallizing into understanding. I'm saying I won't hold you back if you don't want this. If you don't want me and everything that comes with it. His hands came up to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle despite the violence those same hands had committed hours ago. Your father's debt is forgiven. Every single penny. You're free to leave, Rose, and I won't stop you. The words hit her like a physical blow. He was setting her free, letting her go because he thought she wouldn't choose him, wouldn't choose his world. But he was wrong. Rose had never been more certain of anything in her life. She would die for this man, would choose him over safety, over sanity, over everything. She knew it now with bone-deep certainty that transcended logic or reason. Without thinking, without hesitation, she pressed her lips to his. He kissed her back immediately, a primal sound escaping his throat that made her knees buckle. His hands tightened on her waist, pulling her impossibly closer, the kiss deepening into something desperate and claiming and full of everything they couldn't say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rose looked directly into his eyes. I love you, Taemin. His eyes shot up instantly, surprise and disbelief warring across his features. What did you just say to me? I said I love you. Rose's voice was steady now, certain. And maybe I always have. From the day you stepped into my father's cafe and stole every ounce of breath I had. From the first time you called me to your room and didn't take me. And then when you did take me, I've loved you through all of it. And I'm not backing down. I'm not leaving. She cupped his face in her hands, making sure he heard every word. Your world terrifies me, but living a life where you're not mine terrifies me more. The confession hung between them, heavy and true. She'd done it. Poured out everything she'd been feeling for months. Laid her heart bare in front of this dangerous, complicated, beautiful man. He looked at her like she'd given him the world. Like she'd offered him something he'd never dared to hope for. Then, without a word, he scooped her up in his arms and carried her toward their bedroom. His eyes said everything his mouth couldn't. Gratitude, disbelief, love so intense it made her chest ache. He laid her down on their bed with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd seen him do tonight. When he covered her body with his, it was different from before. Slower, more tender. Every touch deliberate, worshipful, reverent. They came together in a tangle of desperate need and overwhelming emotion. But this time, it wasn't just about passion. It was about choosing each other, about accepting all the broken, dark, twisted parts and loving them anyway. And through it all, Taemin kept whispering against her skin, I love you. I love you. I love you, Rose. Like a prayer, like a confession. Like he'd been holding the words inside for so long they had to pour out or destroy him. Rose had never felt more complete, more whole, more exactly where she was supposed to be. After, when they lay tangled together in the sheets, both still breathing hard, Taemin propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at her. His hair was disheveled, his eyes soft in a way she rarely saw, his expression vulnerable. Marry me, Rose. Rose's breath caught. What? I said marry me. He traced his fingers along her cheek, down her jaw, his touch gentle. I know this is fast. I know we've only been together a few months. I know my world is violent and dangerous, and everything you should run from. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. His thumb brushed across her bottom lip. Before you, I didn't care if I died tomorrow. I built an empire on blood and darkness, and it meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. No reason to want more than survival. His voice dropped lower, raw with emotion she'd never heard from him before. You walked into my world as payment for a debt, and you became the only thing that matters. You make me want to live, Rose. You make me want to build something that lasts. You make me want to be better than what I am, even knowing I'll never be good enough for you. Tears were streaming down Rose's face now, but they were good tears, happy tears. You're everything I need you to be. Then marry me. Let me wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Let me protect you and provide for you and love you the only way I know how. His hand slid to rest over her heart, feeling it beat against his palm. Let me make you mine in every way that matters, not because I bought you, not because you owe me anything, but because you choose me, because you want this as much as I do. Yes. The word burst from Rose before she could even think. Yes, 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 I'll marry you. His smile was devastating, rare and genuine and full of an emotion she'd never seen on his face before. Pure, unfiltered joy. He kissed her hard, possessively, like the Mafia Don he was, like she was his prize, his treasure, the one thing in his dark world worth protecting. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. You're going to be my wife. And you're going to be my husband. Rose laughed through her tears. God help us both. God abandoned people like me a long time ago, little Rose, but somehow, he sent me you. He kissed her again, softer this time. I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. They stayed wrapped in each other as dawn fully broke over Seoul. Two people who'd found something precious in the darkest of places. Two people who'd chosen each other despite, or perhaps because of, all the reasons they shouldn't. Rose drifted off to sleep with Taemin's arms around her, his lips pressed to her temple, his whispered, "I love you," the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her. For the first time in her life, she felt completely safe, completely loved, completely home. Across the city, in an expensive motel room, Minji sat on the edge of a sagging bed, her phone pressed to her ear. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her perfectly manicured nails chipped and broken. She'd heard what happened to her father, heard about the permanent damage Taemin had inflicted, heard the message loud and clear, run and never come back. But Minji had never been good at accepting defeat. I don't care what it costs, she said into the phone, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. I want her dead. That black fool took everything from me. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical. Killing Kang Taemin's woman? That's suicide. Not if he doesn't see it coming. Not if we make it look like an accident. Minji's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Everyone knows accidents happen, especially in old buildings, like coffee shops. There was a pause. The father's cafe? Burn it down, with him inside if possible. Minji's smile was cold, unhinged, twisted with madness. Let's see how much Rose loves Taemin when her father's ashes are on his hands. When? Soon, before she gets too comfortable thinking she's won. Minji's laugh was hollow, broken. She took everything from me. It's only fair I return the favor. The line went dead. Minji sat in the darkness, her mind spinning with plans for revenge. She'd lost everything. Her pride, her father's power, her place in society. All because of one woman who didn't belong in their world. But she'd make Rose wish she'd never heard the name Kang Taemin. She'd make them both suffer the way she was suffering now. Outside the motel window, Seoul continued its endless rhythm, oblivious to the darkness brewing in one woman's heart. Oblivious to the danger creeping closer to an innocent man who only wanted to run his cafe in peace. Oblivious to the tragedy that was about to unfold. If you enjoyed Rose and Taemin's intense love story, subscribe now for episode 4, where everything comes to a head. Will Minji succeed in her revenge? Can Taemin protect both Rose and her father? What happens when wedding plans begin and enemies close in? Hit that like button and comment below. Do you think Rose made the right choice? Should she have walked away while she had the chance? Let me know what you predict will happen next. Don't miss episode 4. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single moment of this dark romance saga.